Good afternoon, everyone.
I'm Alex Ferraz.
Tyler Ferraz.
And I'm Seamus Reardon, and we're here to tell you about European starlings.
We did our project on an invasive species, the European starling. But what is an invasive species, you may ask? An invasive species is an organism not native to a region that competes with the native species for resources. They are often very successful in their new habitat due to a lack of predators, among other factors. The Sternus vulgaris, the average weight is 3 ounces with a wingspan of 14 inches and a length of 8.5 inches. They can be found in Europe and North America. You can spot them by their speckled back, and they have a shiny green coloring along the neck and their breast, and their diet consists of insects and grains.
So here's some statistic. They lay eggs in clutches of 5 to 6 eggs up to twice a year. The incubation period lasts about 12 days. Chicks fledge at 3 weeks post-hatching, and their average lifespan is up to 2 to 3 years. But the oldest recorded individual was 15 years, and they fly at a top speed of 48 miles per hour.
So these little birds have a very common reputation for being kind of loud and obnoxious. Here's a compilation of sounds that they make. I think that proves the point quite nicely, to be honest. So how the European starling was introduced to America is actually a bit of a funny story. In 1890, a New York pharmacist named Eugene Schieffelin bought a bunch of the birds and imported them from Europe at high expense. The idea was that they were going to release these birds in Central Park in hopes that they would take flight and actually make a home for themselves in the New World. The only problem is that they'd previously done this with other birds mentioned in Shakespeare's works, the nightingale and the skylark, to be named chiefly. The result of this, however, was the birds didn't thrive and, in fact, all died. With the starlings, they were hoping that they would take hold and actually be able to move on. And, all the birds that are currently found of the species here in the New World all can be related back to the original 100 or so that were released on March 6th, 1890. This passage that you see on the screen was actually brought to us from Sarah Zemlinsky from the Smithsonian Institution.
How the starling spread across North America was discovered in a 1953 study conducted by Brina Kessel for the Condor in Oxford Ornithological Journal. The migratory patterns of the birds revealed that their proliferation in America was thanks to the birds' sporadic migratory patterns. Juvenile first-year and second-year starlings that have not bred are extremely variable in their migratory behavior, showing few definite patterns of movement. Their irregular movements and random selection of breeding areas appear to be the mechanism through which the starling has extended its range across North America.
So you may be asking yourself, how much damage could a single 3-ounce little noisy bird actually cause? Well, these birds have been known to actually bully other species and force other birds away from their native nesting grounds. In a 1978 study conducted by Norman H. Weitzel for the Cooper Ornithological Society, he observed that on his own land, prior to 1978, starlings had never been observed on the property. In February of 1979, 2 pairs began nesting activities. By the end of March, the nesting pairs had increased to 8. At this time, American kestrels, house wrens, and northern flickers, native birds to Nevada where this study was conducted, attempted to begin nesting habits as in years previous. But starling aggression caused all of these native birds to cease nesting activity. This is a common occurrence with starlings, and some are even known to lay their eggs in another starling's nest in hopes that they'll raise their young thinking that they're their own. This practice is called parasitic nesting, and it's not exclusive to starlings, but they are a major component of this practice.
Due to their feeding habits, European starlings cause widespread damage in agriculture areas across the United States. According to the New York State Invasive Species Information Site, the damage caused by European starlings on the agricultural industry was estimated to be approximately $800 million per year at $5 per hectare. This is due to their foraging habits of eating grain and other crops that may be planted by farmers. The European starling poses many hazards. For example, when migrating, the European starling can form flocks numbering to the thousands of individual birds. These flocks can interfere with aircraft, which could lead to potential engine failure of the aircraft, road traffic, which could distract drivers and lead to accidents, and damage to local fauna when roosting, which could destroy trees and other local plants that could be used as habitats for native animals.
So, as Tyler just mentioned, when these birds migrate, they can flock in the numbers of thousands. So, this is a clip from a National Geographic expose showing just a massive flock of these birds taking roost in a tree. So, as you can see here, there's a huge number of them in the air. There's already a massive amount on a tree. Now, imagine if you're an apple orchard owner, or somebody who might have trees on your property that you don't want to have destroyed. There's a clip here. This video is titled "The Exploding Tree." After all these birds taking flight at once. The result, actually, as you'll see, does damage the trees slightly. But if they're doing this en masse several times a day, potentially for however long they're going to be on your property during the migration, it can, over time, damage your tree. Take a look at this. Now imagine that there's pears on this tree, or oranges, or apples. That's the last thing that you want to have around your crops constantly. So as much as we talk in this presentation about how these birds are a pest or a menace, they do have a home in this world, and that is in Europe, as the name European starling would imply. This is a National Geographic video, different from the previous one, that actually shows a massive flock of these birds flying and dancing through the air in the Netherlands during a migration. And I'm going to play this for a little bit with you. There is audio, so let's see. So that sound that sounds like rain is actually the sound of probably around 10,000 of these birds all flying. I'm going to jump it ahead just a touch because it's a bit when they fly directly over the head of the person filming. Now imagine this happening in your backyard, or on your farm, or at an airport, or just generally anywhere that you would not want to hear this constantly. Now, thankfully, even though these birds are quite loud, and as you can see that there can be many of them in one place at a certain time, there are ways to deter them from roosting in areas, and there are ways to keep them from breeding. Efforts to curtail the European starling population here in the United States have been largely unsuccessful historically, but in a 2016 report from the U.S. Forest Service, leaving grass uncut may actually deter the birds from roosting near your property due to the difficulty of ground foraging in higher grasses. Currently, recommendations to reduce the impact of starlings on cavity nesting birds for rangelands include leaving high or moderate levels of residual dry matter, especially in the moist swale areas where starling prefer to forage. Where starlings are present in suburban and exurban areas, avoid mowing of lawns extensively, or at least in spring when soils are still moist, leave lawns unraked if possible. The idea would be that it would cover up the soil where the bird would land and eat, and if there isn't food, then there's no reason that the birds would be nearby. I found in a different part of the U.S. Forest Service website, but not in this specific report, that there are starling pesticides specifically designed to affect starlings, but they are largely discontinued because of the impact that they can have on the other species in the environment, especially native birds that would still be impacted. And finally, here are some of our sources. Some of the articles, several of the reports, the videos that we used on YouTube, the National Geographic highlights, the images of the starlings that you saw along the way. And that is all. Thank you all very much for joining us. I hope you enjoy everyone else's presentations and have a good day. All right, good evening, everyone. This is
This is why you guys had to leave
It's not
when I was
evening.
doing my video.
you gotta at least give them a little bit of context.
I'd say good afternoon.